you're there, you followed this. Give us a little bit of update. What's going on in the legislature? What are they pushing?
Well, the big one, the one that's got the national attention, is permitless carry, or constitutional carry as it's called. This is, I think, getting more attention in Florida than elsewhere for probably three reasons. The first one is that Florida is big, populous. The second is that Florida is governed by Ron DeSantis, who is a subject of great fascination for the media. And the third one is that if Florida adopts permitless carry, it will become the 26th state to have it.
Yep.
25th state to do it legislatively. Vermont had it judicially going back 100 years. But Florida will be the 25th, legislatively the 26th overall, and thus will represent a turning point, because at that point, a majority of states will have it. It's actually a little bit odd, given Florida's history, that Florida has waited this long to do it. But I'm pretty sure it's going to go through in this session.
Yeah, that's one of the interesting things about Florida, right? It has that reputation, that nickname, the gunshine state, because a couple decades back, they really were at the forefront of these sorts of reforms to gun policy, starting with shall issue gun carry, right? It's the first real big state to do that at a time when gun carry, concealed carry was basically banned everywhere. And so this sort of started that revolution that now has spread to literally every state after the Supreme Court decision last year. And but in 2018, after Parkland, the state actually passed a number of gun restrictions. And so it's been a couple of years since Florida has really been aligned with the other red states that have really pushed the boundaries as far as eliminating some of these restrictions. And so now it seems like, it's catching back up perhaps to where the rest of red America is on these issues, right?
Yeah. Now, on that, I say permitless carry when I talk about this rather than constitutional carry for a couple of reasons. The first one is, although I am vehemently in favor of permitless carry, I'm not convinced that the Constitution mandates it. I'm not convinced that the states cannot enforce some sort of permitting regime. I personally think those permitting regimes are completely pointless. I think they cost people money and time and do nothing. But I think the conclusion in Bruin was correct, that the most a state can do is a shall issue permitting regime, but that it's not necessarily obliged to go further. But the other reason in connection with Florida that I would call it permitless carry is that some people use constitutional carry to mean more than just permitless carry. They use constitutional carry to cover open carry as well. And Florida is not going to adopt open carry unless the bill is amended. Historically, there's a couple of reasons that Florida has been skeptical toward open carry. In fact, it's one of 5 states now, I think, that don't have open carry at all. The first is that Florida was obviously in the Confederacy. It was segregated until the 1960s. And a huge number of prohibitions on open carry in American history came as the result of anti-Black racism. That's why Texas had to adopt it a few years ago. Everyone assumes, well, Texas would, of course, have open carry. Well, no, Texas didn't have open carry. In fact, they didn't have they didn't have concealed carry until the mid-90s, and that's because there was a freak out over freed Blacks owning guns. The second reason Florida hasn't got open carry, probably the reason it won't adopt it now, is that it is a massive tourist destination. And there is just a difference, whether this is right or wrong, in the way that foreigners who come in will respond to concealed weapons, which they can't see, and to openly carried weapons, which they can. And I think there are a lot of people in Florida who are worried that an open carry rule enforced in, say, Orlando would be pretty damaging to international tourism. Again, I'm not endorsing that view, but that's why I think it's never come up. So you're actually, funnily enough, getting a lot of criticism of Florida's bill from the right, because the sort of gun owners of America type groups are pointing out that it doesn't include open carry, and also that while it does have permitless carry, it is for residents only. So if you live in Georgia and you want to drive in, you would have to have a permit from Georgia that would then be reciprocally respected by Florida. Whereas, I looked this up the other day, once Florida has permitless carry, if I get rid of my concealed carry permit, I can drive to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho without needing a permit.
Right.
The vast majority of permitless carry states are permitless carry for everyone, irrespective of whether they live there or not. There are a few exceptions. North Dakota, I believe, requires you to be a resident. But Florida is going to join North Dakota if the current bill is passed as a permitless carry state for residents only, and with no open carry, which is rare.
Yeah, so there's certainly some interesting stuff going on with the permitless carry bill in terms of the details and really where the criticism is mainly coming from inside the state at the very least. Obviously you get the White House, for instance, the other day took a swipe at Florida, claiming that this is the opposite of what they should be doing in the wake of the Pine Hill shooting where the journalist and the young girl were murdered.
Which, of course, had nothing to do with carry at all.
Right. Or an assault weapons ban. The press secretary for President Biden said that, that instead of passing permitless carry, they should pass an assault weapons ban. Of course, that case that she was reacting to, the person had a long criminal history that would have made them prohibited from being able to carry under this bill, I believe, and also used a handgun, which would not have been prohibited under an assault weapons ban.
I actually think that's worth dwelling on just for a quick moment. I'm sure the vast majority of your listeners know this, but it does lead to some confusion in the general population, and confusion that is stoked by the opponents of permitless carry as to what permitless carry actually does and what it means. I saw on Joy Reid's show the other day, one of her guests said that Florida's bill would allow anyone to carry any gun anywhere. And all three parts of that are wrong. It doesn't allow anyone to carry a gun. The same people who are presumptively eligible for a concealed carry permit are allowed to carry, and the same people who are ineligible for a concealed carry permit are prohibited from carrying under permitless carry. It has no effect whatsoever on which guns a person is allowed to own or carry. Those are determined by state law and by the 1934 National Firearms Act. As for the where, that is, again, a completely separate question. The where people are able to carry is set by state law. It differs from state to state. The rules change depending on where you go. So there's this idea that it gets rid of all of the rules around carry that are sort of promulgated in the press, and this is just wrong. And all it does, literally all it does, is remove a bureaucratic hurdle. Under Florida's, you mentioned Florida's shall issue law. It was one of the first states that had shall issue. Everyone, as long as they fit into certain categories, is eligible for a concealed carry permit. They just have to apply. Now, those categories are their age. They have to be over 21 in Florida. Their status, you can't be a tourist. Their not being a felon or mentally ill.
Right.
And then in Florida, there was some training requirements. As long as you meet those, you get the permit. It's not like New York, although this is changing because of Bruin, that's a whole other conversation, where some police officer somewhere gets to decide whether or not you get a gun. All this does is it stops you having to apply. Now, the best argument that I've ever heard for this, which I think is weak, is that the problem with that is that it removes the training requirement. If you were seeing an increase in accidents everywhere because of constitutional carry, that would carry more water. We're not, so who cares? But other than that, it's not changing who's eligible and who's not. And I just thought it was worth reiterating, because every time I turn on the TV and I hear someone arguing against this, they say that these bills do what they don't.